Well, hello and welcome. My name is Phil Adlam and I'm delighted to be joined by Peterborough United co-owner Stewart Thompson and Deputy Leader for the City Council, Wayne Fitzgerald. We'll start with you, Stewart. If you could sort of outline where we are. I mean, you're obviously in Canada. We're both in Peterborough. We've both got the sunshine. But why are we all on a Zoom at this moment, Stewart? Talk us through where we are.
Well, I like to sort of say it this way is, what did we do to the city council and why are we here? And the reality is that we're here because we've spent a lot of time looking at whether we can stay where we are as a club, and it can't be done. And I mean, when I became an owner 3 years ago with my partner Jason Neal, we knew one of the things that was kind of sacred in Peterborough was Weston Homes London Road. And in fact, I've always said I thought that would be one of the untouchables. But it's 3 years on. We found that the old lady is old. There's a lot of things about her that can't be sustained. And every opportunity we've had to look around and say, can we just expand where we are? Can we move into that parking lot? Can we go up? Can we look at what Liverpool did and cantilever the second story of it? All of that actually cannot be done. I guess everything can be done. Let's be candid. If we want to spend more money than a new stadium to fix up London Road to an adequate 1930s venue, that's the best we can do. So we have to move. We're going to be moving, and we've been working with the city council and Wayne and for 3 years now, and we've looked at 4 or 5 or 6 places. And the one that makes the most sense is actually the one that we have synergy with the city on, which is the master plan. And the master plan involves reinvigorating a downtown core, bringing education, commerce, spiritual life, and entertainment and social and physical activity together in a really binding square all around the Embankment as the center of it. So we haven't come to this point lightly. We're about to start the planning process. Obviously, we'll have the decency to wait till after an election's over, Wayne. But the reality is that when we look at things, and we could talk about this morning, Phil, we can talk about the other places, but it's just so obvious where we should be, and there are other places we could be.
Mm-hmm. And Wayne, from the council's perspective, as Stewart said there, obviously been working together for a number of years now. What's the status in terms of the council's view on everything at this moment in time?
Thanks, Phil, and thanks, Stewart. Great to be here today. And you're right, we've both got sunshine. And yes, we're both big Posh fans. I mean, stage is set behind me. It's not deliberate, but that is my coat at the moment because it's so cold. And I'm so glad I've got a Posh coat. It's really warm. And my little minion mascot is because we are in quite rarely in election time. So look, let's cards on the table here. There are going to be some people watching this that will agree and disagree. And that's inevitable because that is life. But my purpose for being here today is to kind of put a few facts on the table, because I read online all sorts of things and, people's differing views, and some are very angry and, some are supportive. So let's try and hammer out some of the myths today about where we are and where the council is and where the football club is. So it is true that the council have had a very close relationship with the football club in more recent years as the landlord particularly, but that has now changed. The position has moved on from that, and the destiny of the ground is very much in the hands of the owners. I will say at the outset here, I have no pecuniary interest or other interest in the football club. I'm not a director or a shareholder. I'm a councillor. I don't get paid by the football club. I am here because I choose to be here. But I am a Posh fan, and I've always been. I know most of the team down at the football club, and I have done for many, many years. So look, the position of the council, and I'm talking about the council as opposed to councillors, is this. We operate in planning terms by a set of rules and policies. And in this particular case, the local plan, which has been referred to many, many times, sets out, a number of criteria across the city that what certain land is used for, whether it's employment land, building land, housing land, or green open space, etc. And every bit is covered by a policy. this is no different on the Embankment, okay, which there is work going on to create a university for Peterborough, and most people should know about that. And there's a lot of green but underused open space. That is true, but it is covered and protected. So I personally, nor the council, can give a guarantee to Peterborough United or anybody else that planning permission would be granted. It is the same process if the club wished to put in a planning application to build a multi-use stadium, which is my understanding, not just a football stadium, on the Embankment. They would have to go through full public scrutiny. What would also have to happen is what they call an exception to policy, because the policy says, and I'll probably be able to bring it up for you if I share my screen, which will give some idea to people what the local plan, particularly LP 51 here, and I'll leave it on the screen for a few minutes, that says what you can and can't do. It also talks about the site in general terms. So an exception to policy would have to be given if the planning committee, because that's where this would go, decided to grant planning permission for a multi-use stadium. So you can see down here, it talks about the site and it being relatively underused and of generally poor quality for such a prominent location. So people can study this, they can pause it, but that is the truth of the matter. So if the club do put in a planning application, the whole world and his wife will have an opportunity to engage with the council and give their view, that they would write in objection or in favour or with any other comments they want to make. There will be no kind of hiding. The planning process is quite clear for everybody, and that includes Peterborough United. No council or councillors can guarantee planning permission. I'll reiterate that. It will go through the proper process and be judged. And in this case, it would be an exception to the plan. So the benefits of doing it would have to outweigh the negatives of doing it. I hope that's clear.
Yeah, let me validate that. I mean, it would have been great for us, the three owners, to being able to do the London Road project and then tie the Embankment together. So as we're spending money, everything's linked together. But now we're basically, from our point of view, in a bit of limbo, because for us, we couldn't tie the old stadium to the new, because the new stadium is actually going to be decided by basically voters and by council. And it's because we have to go through due process. So that's why people have asked, well, why are they doing both, Phil? We get the question about, I don't understand the requirement to do London Road. Why not just go to the Embankment? Well, we had to buy London Road because at the end of the day, everybody, and I want to say this to all the groups, Wayne, you pretty much said it, is take a pill, because right now, relax, we're just in that dialogue stage. And we may be at London Road because we don't pass this. But again, I think all indications are we are fitting into a master plan that makes a lot of sense. But we are specifically, exactly what Wayne said, stuck right now because we will have to go through the planning process. There is no way around it. And we're not trying to get around it.
No. And Stuart, what was you there? I mean, obviously, Wayne sort of touched on it about the university, which is obviously taking sort of shape in that particular area. That's really important to the football club as well, because it fits in as part of the master plan for the city.
Yeah, 100%. I think I've said this before, and I'll be consistent with this. We actually think what we build in that 9 acres we need is actually going to be a entertainment and community center, arena, if you want to use that word instead of stadium, although I think it's got connotations for the hockey arena. But that sense of this is a venue that's for the community 250 days a year. Oh, and by the way, it happens to play football 40. And we're working really hard right now on MOU that we'd love to have announced quite soon with ARU. And it's going to be about how we blend what the university's doing with what we're doing. As people, we've said before, Jason and I are both angel investors. We spend a lot of time in tech. So we've talked about a tech accelerator. We've talked about linkages with classes, with physical space, and obviously plant around the green space as well. So ideally, before we get to planning and before we come to Wayne and the group, We're aligned with the city, aligned with the university. And Wayne, I thought what you said is great. We're not going to please everybody. There's two sides of a coin, and we recognize that, and we're trying to actually make it so that people can see. We spent a lot of time thinking about this.
The whole point of my job as a politician is that I'm elected generally to make decisions for the majority, the people who don't want to themselves make every decision. But inevitably, there are ideological positions, whichever political spectrum you're coming from. And I'll try not to be too political, but inevitably we may touch on the politics of it as we get into this discussion, because, you know, the way people are made, they just have different views. But I take the view that the majority of people that voted for me would think like me. I'm not saying everybody does, and I respect other people's opinions, but we have to go with what we think is the right thing to do. And, you know, I'm just a normal person like anybody else. I don't get everything right, but I can only do my best, and so can councillors from all political parties, but we just don't agree on ideological positions sometimes, and we have to live with that. So we won't please everybody all of the time, but inevitably, you know, I guarantee you now that our conversation today will be used by some in a negative way, and I just have to live with that and accept it and move on. But I am positive about Peterborough. You know, we've had 21 years of growth and prosperity in this city, and we are on the up. Peterborough has been, you know, and remains in the top 5 fastest growing cities in the country. There's got to be a reason for that, you know, and I put that down to good administration, but I'm bound to say that.
And Wayne, to be fair, as you say, you talk about the growth of Peterborough and where it is at this moment. It's grown all of the time. People are relocating to Peterborough to open businesses here. You must be excited about the city's future, given what's, you know, in the pipeline.
If you look around you and just a stone's throw from London Road, you know, look in the skyline, see what's happening around you. The growth, the building works, we're building more houses. Granted, not enough, I know that. But, you know, compared with other places, we're really doing well. We've got the university. It's all positive stuff. I know we've had a few blows, you know, with John Lewis and Next and other things, but, you know, we only have to look to ourselves about where we shop. And is that down to people like us on this call shopping online? The face of retail is changing across the world, not just here in Peterborough. And we have to adapt and survive and, you know, look after the people that have lost their jobs. That's my main concern really at the moment. But, you know, overall, Peterborough is a great place to live, and I won't have anybody run it down. And that includes the football club as well. By the way, where are we at the moment? Just as a point, but anyway.
And still, actually, it's quite a reference point, because we spoke not so long ago. Obviously, you're fresh to the city in terms of you don't have any history prior to, obviously, when you came into Peterborough. And you've said numerous times what a great city it is. You've been all over the UK, and people who live in the city perhaps don't recognise how good the city is.
Well, and quite honestly, as we're having the conversation, one of the things that makes Peterborough really amazing is the green space. And, you know, I have traveled all over the UK. I've got some business interests that, you know, were developed in Cambridge and are now in Coventry. I've spent a lot of time up in the Northeast. I don't think sometimes, I'm always shocked to see Peterborough is always run down. And Wayne, you're right. I think the only people that seem to run it down are the locals. But, you know, it is one of the prettiest places, I believe, that in England, because of the green space and the utilization of it. So I hope I've been clear as well that from the beginning, we believe the green space is important, because it is actually part of, we've seen the strategy documents, we've seen the push for Peterborough Green, and we know that the stadium's going to have to embrace that, and we want to embrace that. You know, one of my favorite things as a football fan was the walk from the tube station across Putney Park to Fulham, and I'd like to you know, recreate that inside of Peterborough, where you walk by our iconic cathedral, across a green space that has a beautiful walkway to our iconic stadium, while you're looking at our university with the river on the right hand side. I think that would really bring people's eye and attention into Peterborough, and we want to be part of that. and the stadium will be as green as we can. We see a real move, and we've got a couple of people involved with us that are pushing beyond, carbon neutral into plus. And we think that the stadium and our requirement to be involved in tech acceleration, we think we can actually be on the cutting edge of some of the things that go into our stadium that make for a really green opportunity. There, Wayne, that's the good stuff right there. Appreciate that.
Yeah, there's all sorts of speculation and everything else. And I would agree, Randy, with your green agenda. The council is doing what it can. We have aspirations to be the environment capital of the UK. And we do what we can, often in stretch resources. But, we don't want to take all the green space, as people might think. You can see here, and by the way, these are illustrations. They're not reality. These are just what could be in terms of visioning. And people can freeze this again if they want to watch it back. But area 3 here was perhaps more or less where the utilized green space is now in terms of reality about the beer festival and everything else. And just to give some perspective, the Embankment site is about 70 acres, circa 70 acres. And I believe at site 2 here, you're just about, if it were to go ahead and you got planning permission, I believe it has a footprint of about 9 acres. So it's not, taking all the green space. And I think probably what we should say is, I know you don't want to concrete over and take all the green space, Randy. I think that, in terms of, I'll get to my own personal views, but, if you want to move into some questions or anything, and we can break it up a bit, otherwise it's just Randy and I talking all the time, I suspect. But, that is a good illustration really of how all that would fit together if it were to go ahead. And I'll stress again, this is not reality. These are just, blue sky thinking about how things could fit together.
I think that's important as well. That sort of slide sort of demonstrates a lot of the questions that we have had in from the public, and we'll ask some questions now, as you say, just to break it up so that people don't think it's just us having a conversation and they had no reason to get involved. And some of the questions we've covered already. The first question that was to Randy, he covered in the first bit with regards to the stadium, and I'm obviously currently sat in the sort of back office of what is the Western Home Stadium now, and a window would be nice if I'm honest. But I'll take what it is.
You got to wait for promotion for the window.
Exactly. How's the window and the asbestos going for you today? I was going to say.
It could be 40 degrees out there, Randy. I have no idea, to be honest with you, but it's nice and cozy. One of the questions we've had in for Wayne is around about access, and it's quite interesting you put that slide up, because one of the questions we had in was actually from a guy called Kenny. He said, should we be concerned by access problems if the stadium is built on the embankment, or is there a new junction off and onto the Parkway and access road via Bishop's Road or by the Quay Theatre, or is it planned that most access for fans will be a stroll along the river? Now, I know, Randy, you touched upon that. I keep calling you Randy, and it's my own fault. Stuart,
okay. We've always said that once we become friends, you could go by the Canadian name.
Exactly. But for the purpose of this, I will call you Stuart from now on, I promise. And it's nice to sort of walk along the river. But Wayne, I don't know if you touch on the plans, should they get that far with regards to access?
Well, I've just put on screen now an initial,
I like this one, Wayne. This is great.
Early indication of how transport and movement might work on the whole Embankment site. But personally, in reality, I've been going to Posh for many, many years. How do most people get to the ground? They walk. Mm-hmm. Nothing will change. There isn't going to be a parking problem. In actual fact, what most people don't already know here, on the Quay Theatre site, there are already plans to replace that hard standing car park with a multi-storey car park. That's already in the plan. Nothing to do with the Embankment or the Posh or anything else. That is already in place, that we were going to redevelop that. The car park to the north of the site here has caused some controversy quite recently, until I spotted that the Combined Authority for Cambridgeshire and Peterborough had put in the planning application, which allowed for a multi-storey car park, but in reality, it wasn't actually going to happen. But to allay fears of residents on Bishop's Road, I, in conjunction with the leader, had that withdrawn from the planning process. So at the moment, it's not going ahead. There is some additional parking over here, but you can see, with the key here for the routes as it's laid out. So, most people would walk to the ground, and what would change from now in the sense that, there's still the railway car park, there's still the existing car parks. I know there was talk about Fair Meadow in that car park, because we've got plans to build a new leisure pool, swimming pool and leisure centre on that car park. So yes, but we've also got here, you'll see the new car park at San Martin House here, and this here denotes the new river bridge that's part of the Towns Fund that we have got recently, 25 million in total for the city, that a bridge will be built over the river. So there is no issue about access or problems to the site. Most people will walk. Most people that still traveling away fans will do what they've always done, and in actual fact, if you think about it, the misery, and I'm sorry, folks, it is a criticism, not your fault because it's historical, that the misery that residents face in Fletton and Woodstone, in the roads surrounding the ground, we are where we are with it, but all that misery will go away for them if the ground moves, wherever it moves to. So there are some positives about on-street parking as well. There's adequate parking in the city, and in fact, there will be more, as you can see from this diagram, how the traffic and movement flows onto the embankment should that go ahead.
Perfect. Stewart, we've talked earlier on about green's the optimum word. Everyone's talking about it at this moment in time. With it being the flavour of the month, this is how it's been described, is there any aspect of the build that you're looking to incorporate renewable energy or anything along those lines, or is that something that is being discussed at this moment in time, but obviously planning down the line is hard to sort of put into stone?
Well, so we've had a group that's been working. Trevandy's been working with us for almost 2 years now in terms of getting us to draft plans. A lot of people know that the three partners took a trip to Hungary to see potential stadium that could be very close to what we're doing. And early on, we've been bringing in the consultants that we're trying to work with. We've talked with people at British Water. We've talked to people that have actually a history of building HVAC systems that are carbon neutral. We've talked about potentially hanging walls. So we're looking at all options, and quite frankly, not just the standard ones. Let's potentially be really creative about it. So I think we've been consistent. I don't feel that we've just been saying green, green, green as a flavor of the month. I think if anybody actually goes back to Phil, you and I think we're hanging out in Portugal was our first one, and Spain was our second one on let's catch up on what our plans are. And I think we've said for 2.5 years, green's the flavor of the decade. It's not the flavor of the month, and we're participating in that. Listen, I mean, we can say it's just an emotional agenda, but the reality is that if I change hats and I go to my cold, ruthless, shark angel investor, there was a time where green energy was like a nuclear winter. We're investing in for things that were happening. Solar panels is an example. You couldn't get enough heat out of those panels. And you look at what's happening now, and yes, Uncle Elon has done a great job to make this a profitable business area, but green isn't just a flavor and just a passion. It makes business sense. So that is a nonpartisan look at green. Whatever it is that motivates you, there's no excuse for not incorporating it right now, and especially if we're going to do something as iconic as we're thinking about. So I look at famous cities with famous parks in the middle, and Wayne, you said right up front, the Embankment isn't a famous park in a famous city right now. But if we look at Central Park, if we look at Stanley Park in my own country, Vancouver, there are places where green and commerce have mixed together to make a place where everybody comes. And I think that's what we're trying to do here. I'm just going to go on mute. It is 7:30 in the morning here, and my children, aka 3 dogs, are making a ruckus in the background while they're getting fed. So any
fine.
chance of being professional has just gone out the window.
Look, before you move on to another question then, Phil, I suppose on the back of Randy's points about green, I will give you my own personal view. So I can't speak for the council as a corporate body. I can speak as me, and me as a Conservative, and me as the Deputy Leader of the council. So my view of the Embankment is I want to make it a destination all year round, personally. So I am for the redevelopment, but sympathetic redevelopment of the Embankment. So rather than it be largely a muddy field most of the year round with the Great Beer Festival or whatever else is on it. So, you know, whether it was a, you know, if somebody came forward with any plan, I would be supportive if I felt it was the right thing. So in this case, a multi-use stadium, as Stewart is suggesting, to me ticks a lot of boxes. But I don't want to concrete over, you know, the whole of the Embankment. I want to see a sympathetic development incorporating wildlife, biodiversity, improving the riverfront, making it a place for families to come all year round to picnic, to have fun, but also keep, you know, things like the beer festival and other opportunities. Let's make it the jewel in our crown in the city centre and spend some money on making it a destination for people to visit and something that we can be proud of in the city. What most people don't actually know about the Embankment, strangely enough, it was actually once the council dump many, many years ago, which is why the swimming pool is built on stilts, in effect, the regional pool. So the ground in itself has some issues in terms of the substrata, as it were. And we need to make more use of it. So I personally would be supportive, but I'm going to come back to what I said earlier. I can't make promises about planning or anything else. That is not for me. I'm talking about my personal view, is that I would be supportive personally of a move to the Embankment. And again, I've looked at the alternatives, you know, and I know why we can't build the other side of the Embankment. We will not today have every detail available at the fingertips that we can put into this a small meeting. But if anybody wants to know anything, they should either email Stewart or email me or anybody that can answer specific questions. There's no secret here. This will be gone through with a fine-tooth comb, but there are already some understandings, like the things I've been showing about transport and why it can't be built the other side of the Embankment. We know the answer. Well, in the local plan, it's earmarked for housing. Why would you want to put a football stadium next to housing where we've already got that, and that doesn't work very well? That's not really good for residents living next door to the stadium as is. Why would you want to move it to more residents? So there's all sorts of issues that, you know, would take forever and a day to individually answer. But please send in questions. You know, I'm happy to answer anything if I can, and I'm sure Stewart is as well. So my own personal view is, look, a sympathetic redevelopment of the Embankment that still leaves plenty of green space out of 70 acres that people can enjoy is not covering over or getting rid of our green space. And I personally think that we should look to improve our facilities in the city if we can possibly do so.
And it's interesting as well, from a personal point of view, as someone that's obviously lived in the city for nigh on 40 years, you know, with Fairy Meadows, with Crown and Country Lakes, with Neen Park, you know, Peterborough is
lots of green space,
already blessed with a lot of green space that perhaps people, you know, I've got a dog recently. I'm learning different things about the city all of the time, you know, and there are wonderful places to go, and it's not the case that any planned development is going to get rid of every bit of green space in the city.
That's not the case here at all. No, nobody's suggesting
it. Stewart, I believe that the dogs may be under control. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'm getting there. Holy cow! It's the you know, it's again.
Got a holy cow as well, have you? Wow, you really are branching out.
Oh no, 2 horses, 3 dogs, no cow. There we go. But a holy one.
We'll carry on with the questions. One of the questions is about would the club consider moving outside of the PCC area if the Embankment is rejected? And I think this all boils down to, I suppose the question is, are all the eggs in one basket? And if so, how have we got to that point?
I think they're in two baskets. So I'll say the Embankment or across the road. To be candid, we did even, across the road could go as far as the Greyhound Stadium. So, met with the family, and I know they've shut that business down, but that land is still there. But, East of England, we've talked with them, but we're more interested actually in partnering with them in actually bringing them closer to the middle of the city with some of the things they're doing. They would be a great partner for some of the event planning and things that go on. So now you have two venues. It goes to Wayne's point about, again, one of the things that attracted Jason and I to Peterborough was catchment. Like, Peterborough is a natural hub for a lot of activities, not just football. And so that, being close to the downtown actually enhances that hub concept as opposed to distracts from it. And the further we get away from the heart, I think we actually take part of the heart. I think we're part of it. I don't want to be that egotistical, but I think clubs that have moved out to the burbs, as we would say in North America, have rued that decisions. And we just don't feel that we need to be part of that. We don't think it's the fans, for sure. For those who aren't fans listening to this, the fans for sure have made it crystal clear that moving outside of the heart, moving out of London Road has been tolerated slightly. Moving away from the downtown would bring pitchforks and torches upon us.
That would make transport links nigh on impossible, or
oh my goodness,
certainly more difficult than a central
so many
location.
issues with that.
So there are so many reasons. Forget the embankment issue, but a central location, I believe most people would agree, was sensible and key, just on transport alone, and facilities. I mean, I've been to out of town. I think I went. Where did we go? Brighton. It's difficult to get to. And you're absolutely right, Stuart. It's not really sensible to consider out of town, to be honest.
Yeah, we have four. Phil, just to end, we have 4 locations we looked at in the consulting. So we're not putting all our eggs in targeting and forcing the city's hand. We have other options. It's just the first option is so far ahead of the other 3.
Yeah. One of the questions as well, Stuart, is actually about how do you win the hearts and minds of campaigners? And obviously, as a politician who's with us today, Wayne, I mean, it's all about, I guess, engagement, isn't it? Things like this, Wayne talked right at the outset about, this is a crucial period of time in Peterborough with local elections coming up. So it's engagement, isn't it? It's talking to people.
I was going to say, Wayne answered it already, so this will be my shortest answer of the day. Tell the truth, be transparent, like bring people along every step, follow the rules. I'm going to get to, I saw something about somebody accusing us of a brown bag transfer at some point. That stuff's always going to happen. People watch too much. People have had too much time on Netflix, I think. But tell the truth, be transparent, follow the steps.
I blame line of duty.
Totally.
Which one of us is H?
Yeah.
Stuart's great. What's he talking about?
One of your better exports in the last few years.
Yeah, indeed, yeah.
And Wayne, obviously the local elections are due soon. What do you think the impact on the arena's plans if the Tory council is overthrown? All very hypothetical, of course.
Well, I was hoping to avoid that question on the basis that I don't want to be accused of being political. But as I said, inevitably, these things. Daily life is politics. You come across it one way, overt or covert or whatever. So look, okay, I've given you my view. All right, so I'll move into what I think the position is of the Conservative group. And I've taken the trouble to ask people their views about the suggestion of the football club moving to the Embankment. I've given you my own personal view, and I'm personally supportive. And if anybody wants to know why, by the way, again, there's no way I can give you all my rationale in a few minutes, but I have the benefit of some knowledge, which I'm happy to share. The majority of the Conservative group, and I will specifically say here, I've excluded those on the planning committee, because should an application come to the council, it is a cross-party, quasi-judicial group who, you know, make the best decisions based upon the plans and the information before them, and what they've gathered themselves. So excluding members of the planning committee, the Conservative group on Peterborough City Council are almost unanimous in their support for the football club to move to the Embankment. Now, people now will be going, shock. Well, I'm sorry, you know, you don't have to agree, and, you know, you get your choice at the ballot box, whether that's, you know, in a general election or in a local election. I'm just giving you my view, and those are the Conservative group. What will happen now, people following local politics will know that it's been a tough time recently in terms of we've had a couple of councillors sadly die, and with the pandemic we've not been able to hold elections to replace them. So the council is finally balanced with the Liberals, Labour and the Greens hoping to form enough of a coalition to oust the ruling Conservative group, which I'm a member of which, you know, they will claim 21 years of, you know, neglect. Well, I'm going to tell you it's 21 years of prosperity and good times. But what I can tell you based on that is that, and again, the opposition can't promise you planning permission either. I'm being perfectly clear, I made that clear. But what I can promise you is the opposition won't be supportive of a move to the Embankment. I already know that. Now, you can take me at my word or don't. I'm just telling you that actually, I believe the Labour Party, the Liberal Democrats and others are against the redevelopment of any sort on the Embankment. Now, having me said that in public, they may well go, oh no, that's not true. I'm sorry, folks, it is true. And you know, if you, and I've tried not to be too vocal in public, because it doesn't matter what you say, you know, you're either damned if you do, damned if you don't. So I'm nailing my colours to the mast here. And all the people, well, not all, wrong, a number of people in the opposition groups are in the Save the Embankment camp, for example, of which I'm not. And again, I'll make clear, I don't want to swallow up the Embankment and concrete it over. I want to bring it into use, full-time use for the city, and be sympathetically and environmentally caring about what we do with it, which is different than, you know, taking all the green space. And there'll still be plenty of green space left, even if this goes ahead. But again, I reiterate, because people will twist my words, I cannot promise anything. But what I can promise is my support and our support if we remain in power post May the 6th. I hope that helps without trying to be too political, but unfortunately, there is politics at play here, and I can't help that.
And Stewart, after Wayne very coherently gave a wonderful politician's answer, you're probably going to have to go into that kind of mode as well, because the next question is obviously, as a co-ownership group purchasing the ground here at the Western Home Stadium and moving forward, somebody wants to know how the little old football club will be looked after moving forward.
So try that again, Phil, because I wasn't sure how.
I think what the question is obviously the co-ownership group have obviously purchased the Western Home Stadium, and people are potentially worried about how that affects the football.
Yeah. Okay, and we went through this with one of the supporters trusts. So let me quickly do this, and I'm watching our time. We're supportive of Wayne's comments. You know, this is political. There's no way around it. If the timing of this is not not without thought. I mean, the reality is that we as the co-owners trying to drive forward our agenda, if the election goes a different way and the Embankment is determined as green space, you know, we might be thwarted for another decade. If we think about having to go back, recalibrate plans, think about the transportation issues that go with other sites, think about the neighborhoods that we have to petition or coerce into accepting us to be there. Getting ourselves outside of the master planning process, it could actually put us back a long way. So this is political. There's no way around it. And the three of us have been very upfront about our support for the groups that are going to drive that agenda to put the club back into the master planning process. The other comment, Phil, is completely commercial. And I have more, if anybody, as Wayne has said, wants to talk about this, and I mean talk about it, email me, we'll set up a time. But the reality is that I've said that there's, I do a lot I go around the world and I help entrepreneurs with planning how to grow their companies. And I say in business, there's no such thing as a good decision. There's just hemlock and arsenic. So when you're making a business decision, you're choosing which poison you want to drink. And with the club's decision to separate the football ground from the club, Peterborough is a great example of both hemlock and arsenic. Because in our past, we've had places where the club and the stadium were tied together, and the club ran out of money because it couldn't sustain both, and therefore put itself in a really tough financial position. And it's been in a position where it was separated, and the ownership exploited that in a way that wasn't actually conducive to growing the club. So fans of the club have seen what happens in both situations in a negative place. We are looking at separating it. That's our choice. That's our poison, because we believe that we can actually finance easier, get outside investors to participate to spread risk. And when we bring in people that are real estate developers, because I am not, in fact, owning the stadium is my first real estate investment ever. Think about that. Other than owning my house properties, my wife and I don't even own a second property, right? We literally have never done property development. Why would you want us to carry on with that? Obviously, I have a real estate magnate as a partner, but I think he was, again, more on the sales side than the development side. So we've actually said, Phil, that we believe that this is the best decision to keep the club safe, is to keep it away from the development of this facility that, again, there's going to be there's going to be events, there's going to be angel investing, there's going to be green space, there's going to be a whole lot of things that don't have a lot to do with playing football. We think this is way safer for the fans. But again, that was the poison we've chosen to drink at this time.
And Stuart, following on from that, actually, one of the questions about a new stadium on the Embankment is about shops, cafes, etc., and who would be the landlord of that? How would that work? Is that something that, again, having a good relationship with the council is imperative to those kind of conversations?
Absolutely. Again, anything to do with shops and common space, think about it. This is what I love. I get energized with this conversation, Wayne. I'm super excited by this. Imagine the city and the university and the club sitting together thinking about that entertainment space. And anybody who's ever traveled, a lot of you have, think about San Antonio with the Riverwalk, or think about some famous cities in Europe where you've gone and said, this is amazing how it's all tied together. And it draws people to, I would love to be a restaurant owner. And we've thought about it, believe you me, the three of us. I would love to be a restaurant or cafe owner along the Embankment. But imagine that we don't put it on the green space. One of my favorite places to go for a beer happens to be a boat with a picnic area. I'm not going to name names because that would be shameless plugging of particular places to go for a pint that are close to London Road. Imagine boats along there. There are cafes, and there's so much you can do. I could get pretty excited about it, but we're running out of time.
Just to clear up one thing, the City Council will not be giving the land to Peterborough United should they wish to put in a planning application and subsequently purchase, lease, whatever the deal is. There is no deal at the moment, but the council would not be giving any private operator free land.
Wayne, that is the most disappointing thing you've said all along.
I can guarantee you that much. So, but the commercial activities along the riverfront, there is so much scope to make that much more attractive to people, to have a coffee, to have a beer in a cafe culture environment, to improve that whole place where, you're not tripping over needles and waste and excrement and everything else from dogs. Put some pride back into the city. But rest assured, should any development go ahead, whether it's for Peterborough United, the property side of it, or anybody else, there will be a commercial agreement between the parties, either in a sale or lease or whatever it is. None of that has been discussed or decided. This is just about blue sky thinking and about visioning from the council's perspective or mine, and in yours, Stuart, from what the club's aspirations are. So I think we need to, because I noticed that was also one of the questions. By the way, we must thank everybody before we forget for all the questions, and we're trying to get through as many as we can, and I'll shut up, Phil.
Yeah, personally, still, I love charters. I can say it, you can't. In terms of the questions, a lot of the stuff that people are asking seems to have jumped forward so many hurdles, and they think we're at a point that we're not actually at a point at. Like, for example, the local plan. How can the council support this? How can they do this? How can they do that? When can we get a chance to do all this? And a lot of those are concerns from individuals. For example, how does building on the green space align with the council's commitment to Peterborough being an environmental capital? Will there be a review of the local plan? A lot of this kind of stuff is so far down the line.
Well, I think I laid it out to start with. Look, nothing has been agreed. It is not for the council to determine who can and cannot put in a planning application. That is up to Stewart and his business partners, or anybody else for that matter. If you want to put an ice cream parlor on the Embankment next to the Key Theatre, put in a planning application, and the merits of that will be judged. The same with the multi-use arena or anything else for that matter. The council don't determine. The council have a set of policies and plans. I've already said if this were to go ahead and get approved, it would be an exception to the plan, and everything would be in the public domain. So let's just reiterate that again. And we are a long way from that. I mean, I don't know whether in what time scale Stewart and his partners may put in a planning application. I've only told you that our view about the principle of development in terms of the support from me and my colleagues is there. I can't say that is true of the opposition. In fact, I believe it not to be true. But this is a transparent process, and will follow its natural course. But Stuart, I don't know if you want to say anything on that. But
well, my deaf Boston is having pretending it's a wolf over its breakfast, so I've lost all modicum of decency here. But I actually love what you said, and I think we should just here's the big reveal today, which I hadn't planned on. But the reality is, we want to get through the PERDA. We want to get through election. We are good to go. We've been waiting, chomping at the bit, but we just closed on London Road March 31st. This is not a good time for anybody for us to put a planning application together. But as I've already mentioned, we're very close to an MOU with ARU. We have preliminary drawings. We've done the environmentals. So myself and my partners, we are ready to go. We'll let the new council settle down and figure out their chairs and offices before we torment them with the first big thing. But we look forward to be a large issue in the first year of the new council's agenda.
And Stuart, you spoke about the environmentals there. You've sort of done the environmentals because there's a lot of concern over floodplains and water because it's next to a river, and obviously, we've obviously had our own issues here with drainage at the stadium. As you're aware, is that something that's the conversations have taken place about?
Yeah, in fact, that also went into which side of the river which side of Middlehome or the Embankment which should we be on, and for news of the day. People might be shocked to find out the Embankment is less of a floodplain than Middlehome is. So there you go. In fact, I'm trying desperately to drive that stadium as deep into the ground as possible, because I think the cathedral view is massively important. I think we don't want a stadium standing out. Listen, I'm as everybody knows, prior to becoming an owner and fan of blue, I was a fan of something black and white. And then there we go. There is no way around it. Welcome to the first thing in the morning here. And by the way, everybody, just that was Cooper. Nice to meet Cooper. So, you know, I used to do that walk from the train station up a hill to what I used to call the Cathedral of St. James Park. I mean, that thing was definitely set up to be large and seen. And I think actually we're trying to do the opposite. Like if we drive it down and out of the way, the cathedral should still be the focal point of things that happen in Peterborough. So, you know, we have done a lot of the planning. It's in writing, and we're pretty much ready to go with the application as soon as quite frankly, we're waiting for the right political timing because we're ready to go on our side.
Excellent. Wayne, one of the questions that's come up, people seem confused about, I don't know whether you can answer this or not. It may be the case that you can't, but the question was, why is the council, as part of the sale of the current stadium, providing a grant to develop the club's training facilities? If the club doesn't have the finances to do this themselves, how will they finance a new stadium? And I think the important thing, as someone who's obviously a regular down at the training ground, that facility is for the community, and that's a vital part of the council's vision, I suspect.
Well, funnily enough, I do have an answer to that question. Now, I'm bearing in mind, you know, I want to make clear that, you know, all councillors, including myself, we don't have oversight of everything. And I'm not particularly involved in the planning process because, as I've said, it's independent as such and quasi-judicial, cross-party. So, but I do get to ask some questions, or as the deputy leader, I can ask. And in particular, I mean, I you know, the club as the landlord had previously had, my phone's going as well there, previously had commitments with the old ground. So we would have had to provide a new stand, for example, if that relationship continued. So the grant that has been given for the training ground is actually, it's a capital grant. It's not revenue, and those that are understanding of the difference between capital and revenue will get it. If you don't, you can always email us and I'll explain it. But it's been in the capital programme for the council since 2021. It replaces the sum put aside for the new stand capital should Posh be promoted to the championship as per the lease agreement. So we had a commitment previously to do that. So it follows a separate governance process than anything to do with the sale or any other arrangements with the club. And it's with planning for approval at the moment. That training facility, by the way, will also be a community use training facility. So it's not exclusively for the use of the Posh. So it's going to be used by the school, the local community, as well as the football club. So it is a capital amount, and we were on the hook for it anyway within the ground. So it's just repurposing that money, and capital, of course, is not the same as revenue, and it is a grant. So any further details, I could get chapter and verse from you from the finance director who knows it inside out, but that is the answer, because I preempted the question and asked him the question, and that's the answer. Hope that made sense. Sometimes when I talk about finance, I feel like, you know, it's just gibberish, and Stewart is so much better place to talk about numbers. I don't know why that I feel that way.
It's also we're at that juncture that you are a serious, hardcore issues individual. If you're still with us, by the way, you know, it's like we are into the nitty gritty of the details.
Well, we're probably coming up on an hour, I think, aren't we?
I wasn't thinking of the time. It's like just that whole thing about it's so. I love this because it's like it's the details are what people are really worried about, Wayne, and that's what we've been covering for the last hour. And I think that's super important. So when you get into the nitty gritty of that grant, you know, these are part of the issues where people are thinking we've got some kind of nefarious relationship between the club and the city, but all of these things are sitting on.
It's minuted and transparent. I mean, the thing about the council, we do governance to death.
Yeah.
You know, I was asked by a resident when knocking on doors recently about the secret meeting and secret deal between the council and the Posh, and I went, well, unfortunately, sometimes there are things that are commercially sensitive. So we wouldn't want one supplier knowing what we paid another supplier in a competitive process. So occasionally there are things for the benefit of the public, not to try and hide them from the public, but to protect the public purse. But my recollection of the scrutiny committee that Jason was on, because I watched it, was in actual fact, nothing was held back. And it all the detail went public anyway. So that whole kind of press story about secret meetings was actually a red herring. The same lady, by the way, asked me about the tunnels that had been found in the excavation works on the embankment to the cathedral, which would stop the university, not realizing, of course, it was an April Fool's joke. So my advice, folks, don't necessarily believe everything you read or hear without checking with a horse first.
One of the other questions that was asked is all about when can we do this, when can we do that, when can we do the other, and obviously Stewart has partly answered that, because obviously nothing has got to that point as yet. But from a council's perspective, Wayne, obviously once that planning application has gone in, then there is a whole chain of things.
It follows a process. So there is a very prescriptive legal process to follow that, and I'll reiterate again, all those in favor, all those against, and the majority who don't really care, because they generally are the people you never hear from, which is why they elect people to make decisions for them, because, you know, they trust you to do what, by and large, you broadly agree with in terms of the way you think. So the legal process starts once the, or the planning application process, which follows legal parameters, starts when the application is put in. The council then have a duty to determine that application within a specified period of time, which can be extended dependent on the, shall we say, nature of the inquiries, the extent of the research and information that's got to go into. The applicant has got to get time to do their own research. And in this case, it will come down to whether the positives outweigh the negatives. That's what it's going to come down to, because it already is not in the plan, so it would have to be that exception to the plan. And by the way, that's not unusual. It happens all the time. The embankment, you know, is no different than any other area where there is an exception to the local plan being suggested.
I'll try to ask a question, Wayne, from the Conservative Party's point of view. Obviously, there's a question about, you know, how the COVID-19 pandemic has highlighted the need for outdoor space, people being active, etc., etc. That's really important to the party, obviously, and Peterborough. We spoke about the open, the green space that isn't available in Peterborough, but there's so much you could do that you know that Peterborough has to keep people active.
Look, on the embankment as a whole, there's a lot of sporting activity already. We've got the pool, we've got the Lido, we've got the running track, the athletics track. All those things don't go away, and if anything, it's just going. You know, the building of a stadium, if it went ahead, is not going to affect that. And there are. Look, I'm in charge of health and public health in the city, although I'm embarrassed to say so when I get on the scales. You know, so the fact is, I know what our public health agenda is. I know what lifestyle opportunities are available, and I know what people need to do in the city to improve their chances of living longer. Putting a multi-use stadium on the embankment is not going to affect that. Okay, but in actual fact, people will be able to walk more by the river. They'll be able to take their families and walk. It's 70 acres, that whole site, okay? And you know, it's just going to bring that area up completely. But we've got the best cycling routes probably anywhere in the country with the Green Wheel. We've got activities in many of the parks, Central Park, Itter Park, Bretton Park, Neen Park. There is so much around that, you know, this is not going to make people live an unhealthy life. That's a choice people make. You don't need the embankment to go running, but I'd rather go running on nice, clean footpaths and without, you know, the mess that it is now. Thank you.
Stuart, some of the questions we've obviously covered before. One of these questions is about if the potential site on the embankment can't proceed, what happens then? Do you look at redeveloping the existing stadium? Do you go back to sort of plan B, plan C, plan D if this doesn't go through?
You know, we are in a spot where developing London Road is actually not an option. I don't even know how we would pull down Main Stand Phil, you lose that gorgeous office you're in right now.
Devastating.
Right? There is no room. If you, Phil, where do you walk out? If you go out main stand, where are you? You're on a road.
Yeah.
And somebody's backyard is right there. How do we get construction vehicles in there to redo? I think what is Maine is 4,500 people, right?
Mm-hmm.
How do we rebuild that from scratch? On the other side, you know, with the offices, etc., that's where we found the asbestos. Like, and on the one side, you know, against the London Road end, there's no room to build anything. There's no room to actually reconstruct what's already there. This is not an easy process. And as I've already said, nothing's impossible. But you know, how much money do you want to spend? I remember my first company, Phil, was an internet company, and I remember going to the local provider and saying, "Look, I want a fiber optic cable to our main hub so we can resell the fiber optic cable." And the vice president of the telco said to me, "You know, we can run a fiber. Nothing's impossible. How much money do you have?" It's just not a good use of money to actually try to reinvigorate, resuscitate the old lady. So there isn't a plan to stay where we are. I just have to say that. I've already mentioned that we have the 4 that we've looked at. The other 3, Wayne's already covered. Oh, there's all sorts of problems once you go with the other 3, which will delay the process of putting up a new stadium by years, not months. So right now we are in a position that, you know, as Wayne's already said, this is going to be what did you call it, Wayne? An
exception to policy.
An exception. And the only reason we are going to go under that premise, exception of policy, is we believe we are a natural fit to the master plan. And if the voters, if the people that show up at the planning committee don't agree with us, the new stadium's off for decades.
Well, so let me just clarify that for you. Because you will find that often it's a small vocal minority that shout the loudest. The majority of people, normal law-abiding citizens that don't go around with placards protesting and blocking roads and stuff like that, you never hear from them because they trust people to make the decisions. But the planning committee make a decision. Now, it is important about representation for those for and against, but you know, you have to take a balanced view, and the planning committee is cross-party and will be guided by planning policy. They will also have legal advice as to what they can and can't do, or in terms of whether that was lawful and legal. They also cannot be predetermined. They have to have an open view as to the application and treat the applicant fairly. It is the job of the applicant, you or whoever it is, that to convince the planning committee and the officers, because they make a recommendation before it gets to the committee, whether the recommendation is to approve or reject. The planning committee do have the final decision, and ultimately that can also be appealed, whether it's for or against, to the Secretary of State. But it follows a very, very prescriptive process. But the public, and again, let's make this perfectly clear, the public have full consultation and I'm not saying they can all go to the committee, that would be impractical. But, you know, generally what happens is that 1 or 2 people represent, you know, those against or those for or whatever, but all the comments and all the representations are contained within the planning report. So nobody is missed out. So, you know, don't let anybody feel that, you know, it's all a done deal and this, that, and the other. I hear it all the time. That does not happen. And I've told you again, despite what we say here today, and I'm here for the best genuine reasons, and I've nailed my colours to the mast, there will be all sorts of people criticizing me, you, everybody else. But I've got my big boy pants on today. I'm happy to deal with it. And I'm also happy to have any sensible, rational, calm, polite conversations, whatever political party you're in or vote for. You know, it doesn't need to descend into what is often hostility just because you hold a particular point of view. But the planning process is not in question here.
Yeah, agreed.
Stuart, I've got one question that I'm going to ask, because a lot of these other questions, and if we haven't asked your question, the reason behind that is because it's been covered. I'm not avoiding any question. I'm not, I might not read all the question out in its entirety, but I feel, as an impartial man in presenting this, that it's been covered in a wide range of conversations we've had.
Sure.
One of the questions that has come in, and it came in this morning, and it was an interesting one, because I don't understand necessarily why that would be an issue, and it's about noise.
Okay.
And the question is addressed to
Good question.
to Stuart, and it's about whether any data has been gathered with regards to any noise a potential stadium in that embankment location would have in and around that general area. One thing I would subsidise to that is, as someone who's obviously been at this stadium for the last 20 years of working at the football club, we are in and around a residential area, so I can understand why people have concerns. But moving to where that location would be in potential terms, would that have an impact noise-wise on the area within?
And I'm actually going to say I don't know, but we're going to actually look at it. I mean, it is a different concern, right? Because there's the Tuesday night matches, but we know they start and they finish. And one of the things about English culture I'm quite shocked about is the show up at 5 to 3, go to the match and head home, right? As a season ticket holder for the Seattle Seahawks, I fly into Seattle the night before. It's a little bit raucous in downtown Seattle. It's also raucous at 8 o'clock in the morning. 65,000 of your favorite people all walk together through the city to the stadium an hour and a half before the stadium, and it's basically a day and a half event to go to a football game in the States. So if I was worried about that kind of situation starting to happen in English football, this is a good question. And I also said to Phil, we had a line on, and I still think we do. We have a line on potentially the first concert. I'd love to get Rihanna in as our first concert at the Embankment. That will not be a quiet event. And it will be late at night. So I think it's a legit concern. I think obviously the only place that actually has to worry about it would be Middle Homes and the new condos at Fletton Keys, and we'll be looking at that. But it hasn't. I have not seen a noise report, but it will be part of it.
I can give you a little bit more if you like.
That's great. Yeah.
What would be the norm? So already there are a number of concerts and events. Okay. And there is no issue about noise. I'll tell you what the issue is, or what the issue would be, is to what time it goes on.
Yes.
Because, it's a question of what is, quote unquote, reasonable. So if you're having, you can equate this to your neighbor, who has a barbecue and music. If they're doing that till 1 a.m. in the morning, that is unreasonable. But if they're doing it till, 9, 10, 11 o'clock at night, that is not unreasonable. So if there was a concert forget the football stadium. If there was a concert now every week during the summer that a promoter wanted to be putting on, I don't think we, the council, would say no. And by the way, what we currently do, we hire the space to a promoter of said concert, and they pay the council a fee. And they put all the infrastructure in, and they will be given, or they will tell us a time, that is due to end, and we will say yay or nay. Now, if there was a suggestion in the future, whether it's any future development or existing developer, where there was an overwhelming number of complaints that built up over a period of time, the council would be duty bound to investigate those complaints from local residents. And at such time, they would take noise levels and so on and so forth. But it would be unreasonable of the council in law to say you can't make any noise after 8 o'clock, say, for argument's sake. So one has to balance what is reasonable against the residential amenity of those living nearby. But look, I live on Oundle Road, stone's throw from the club, Orton Longville. I can hear the concerts on the Embankment now. Am I bothered about it? Not really. If it was I was more concerned at the police helicopter hovering over my house at 4 a.m. I will second that, Wayne. It woke me up. Very unreasonable, but I understand they got a job to do, and needless to say, they weren't looking for me.
Great. I was going to say, I'd love a quick poll. Who's louder, beer festival goers or
Same
Posh
thing.
fans.
Same thing. Look, you know, they have live music at the beer festival, and it bothers nobody. You know, look, I'm not suggesting, and I don't think you're suggesting that, you know, you're going to have every Saturday and Sunday, 52 weeks of the year. You know, it's going to be better in the summer months, but it is exactly the same now. If there were people wishing to put concerts or promotions on the Embankment now, we would be accommodating. So
Yeah.
if you or the football club or anybody else wants to do that in the future, you would follow the same process, because, by the way, it is also licensed.
Ah, yes. Yep.
It is also regulated and licensed. So you or anybody else would have to have the appropriate licenses for noise, health and safety, liquor, food, you name it. Everybody's treated the same, and it's all licensed activity.
Perfect.
You breach those license conditions, you lose your license.
So what I'd like to do now, I've asked certainly asked the majority of questions. If we haven't, we've covered it within that. If people feel upset that we haven't specifically addressed a certain question that they wanted asked word for word, then, as Wayne and Stewart have indicated early on in the piece, they are accessible. We will make sure that people get those questions across. But I think it's probably just, given the fact that we've been on for quite a while, to end with almost like a closing statement from both of you. It sounds rather like you're taking the stand. We'll start with you, Stewart, as co-owner of the football club. How would you like, you know, this all to play out moving forward?
Well, okay. Yeah, that's a great, thanks, Phil. Wayne, I've enjoyed this, and everybody, I am so sick and tired of virtual town hall meetings like this. I am sure looking forward to seeing you all. I spent my time in Wayne's world, so to speak. I was a chief of staff for 3 years, and we have the British parliamentary system over here in the colonies, of course. And I miss a good debate. I am sick and tired of the social media 140 soundbite calling for my death, as opposed to a legitimate conversation like this. So this has been really good, and I would have loved that we could have had this as a face-to-face dialogue. Wayne and I, as Wayne's already said, you know, we have our big boy pants on about these things. There isn't a conversation I'm scared of. And I may have a point of view, but I hope that you feel like myself on behalf of my partners, we're listening, that we're concerned about the same things that you are. I may take a different approach to the green question than you might, but I hope we can have a civil and respectable debate. My last comment would be this, Phil. I can't wait for COVID to be over. I can't wait for the election to be over. We're a year and a half behind. My ideal situation is we go in, we do the process. The process, Wayne, in my delusional world, takes about 6 months, which we'll have we would have our alignment already on our documentation ready to go by Christmas, and we're back on track to do 18 to 24 months. That is my Santa Claus world, Wayne, but that's the agenda we're on, and the process, I'm going to let Wayne off the hook with my 24 months, but the process will be what the process will be. And we recognize that we don't get a stadium till 18 months after the process. So fear not, Wayne, we're not delusional. But I will tell you this, that Jason and I are hyper competitive, and we have a steak dinner on this. So don't let me down.
Ooh, pressure. Pressure. Well, look, no, Phil.
I was just going to say, important to reiterate, we know your own personal view. We know the Conservative Party's view of moving forward. But as we gave the opportunity to Stewart to sort of close, it's important that you get the same opportunity to make the comments that you wish to make.
I'll just reiterate. I want to thank everybody who took the trouble to write in, whatever their views are, because, you know, it's good that people engage, and we will disagree on matters. But as I've said, people, it just gets so hostile, and I wish it wouldn't, you know, just from a political perspective, because we're all trying to do the very best we can, and I am accepting that, you know, some won't see eye to eye. I've said what my position is. I've said what the majority of my group feel. I've said that I've made it clear about the planning. You know, it doesn't matter whether we're in charge or anybody else is in charge. They can't promise planning. What I can promise is genuine support, both personally and from our group. And again, I've excluded the planning committee members from that. I haven't even asked them, so they're not compromised. And I genuinely want to see the club do well, both personally, financially, and, you know, football. We're almost in utopia this week, aren't we? Almost. Except for them, that pesky Hull. So, yeah, darn them. So, you know, things are on the up. The Posh are on the up. The city is on the up. Despite what the knockers say, I'm not accepting of it. So whoever's in charge, and hopefully it will be us, and I hope many people watching the replay of this conversation will vote for their local Conservative candidate on May the 6th. You know, but do what you like, folks, in the sense that, you know, whatever your conviction is, whatever you believe in, you know, I'm only doing the same now as if I knocked on your door. So, and the club aren't involved politically here. You know, what the club do is what the club do.
But I just want to say we have not hidden our support for this agenda or you.
No, and that's fine.
So I want to be clear with everybody else here. If everybody thinks we're neutral in this,
well, you're on the side of the move and where you want to go, and I'm saying we are. I'm saying the others aren't, and I genuinely believe that. And there's no harm in you saying that, Randy, at all. But I don't want people accusing the club of, you know, making a political, because you're not really. You're talking about the issue, and the issue is we're on the same path on the issue. You know, people decide how they want to vote and everything else, and you know, I'm used to that. And you know, but I believe in Peterborough. We're passionate about improving the city. We want, you know, we've been through a dreadful COVID pandemic. Hopefully everybody's getting the vaccine and we're on the road to recovery and building back better. That's our message here. 21 years of positive growth in the city, and we need to continue that growth for families, for children. And the only other thing I've got to say is UTP.
A great way to end the town hall.